up to Nalanda. So these two images, which I have put across onto the screen, this were captured by me, where me and Vikram Sampath had visited Nalanda recently, and just to find the answers to these questions itself, that whatever are haunting our academia that way. On the left-hand side, you see one image where you can see the depth of the burns which are there. So being a student of architecture, I could make out that this was not some very usual kind of burn, but this was deliberately planned with a lot of materials which could inflame, a lot of inflammable material. So this was not a one-day job, and it took a lot of planning. So it certainly cannot be put upon the people whom the likes of D.N. Jack claim to. We will come to it, that what are the kind of people which D.N. Jack claims to have burned Nalanda. So I was talking about one caravan article. So this is it, which surfaces every year, every time. It will just try to paint the narrative that Hindus killed. The moment you talk about Ram Janmabhoomi, the moment you talk about Mathura or Kashi, then suddenly this article from Caravan will pop on your Twitter timeline or anywhere else on social media, which is written by D.N. Jha long back. So it was debunked by me quite long back. And in fact, D.N. Jha was debunked quite royally by Arun Shourie when he wrote his book, The Eminent Historians, in that all this propaganda was beautifully exposed. So in this very article, the D.N. Jha builds a case that the structures of Nalanda were ransacked by the Hindus, and it all starts with the first instance where he talks about it. I get to what I could find. It was in the General President's address at ISC. So it was in 2000 ICH it was in 2004. So in this, D.N. Jha uses the keywords like Tibetan tradition, Pansam John Jang, which is the source, and Hindu fanatics. Now, Pansam John Jang is a text written by Sumpak Hanpo P. Yasi Palzo, who lived around 1702 to 75 AD. So it means that the text has been written around 500 years after the incidents of the Nalanda has happened. And when did the English translation of Sumpak Hanpo's text, that is Pan Sam John Jang, happen? It happened in 1908, and it was done by a man named S.C. Das, and S.C. Das was an associate member of Asiatic Society of Bengal. And Asiatic Society of Bengal was quite a notorious society back then. It was in that period where it was building on the case of Aryan invasion theory, and so on and on. So, and in fact, record also tells us that he was actually a British spy who was working in collaboration with Macaulay as well. And we have all the sources to tell us that he was actually a spy, and it's not something, it's not a cooked up story at all. So what he talks about in his text, he kind of summarizes whole of a case, despite though he's using the source, a Tibetan text. In his 19 translated work also, actually he has failed to he talks about the Hindu fanatics, but he fails to establish that Hindu fanatics ransacked Nalanda, which has been even claimed by D.N. Jha. So what does it state? It states clearly that you have got an opinion, but you are not very clear. You are not able to prove your opinion at all. So he says that you can see the text in front where it talks about the two beggars who ran from structure to structure of the ginormous Nalanda campus, which were full of Buddhist monks, and they burned the entire campus with this, wherein all the distantly scattered buildings were also existing. So what do we understand from here? It's very clear that the whole story has been cooked up. The source of D.N. Jha, the source of D.N. Jha, as in this very text, which is the translation done by S.C. Das, is just a summary of actual passages which appears in an index that also is not a part of the book. So this is what D.N. Jha has sourced in his book. So what does the actual passage talk about the burning down of a library? What does it talk about in real? So let's go to it. So it says that Dharma has survived 3 attempts of destruction. First, during the varying relations between the king of Turkestan, Kunimastana, and the king of Neo, Dharmachandra. Dharmachandra sends gifts that Kunimastasa thought of prop of the black magic. Hence, he sweeps down from Drukta, destroying the 3 bases of Magadha monasteries, scriptures, and stupas, thereby driving out the monks. Dharmacharya's uncle sent scholarly delegation to China to spread the dharma for which gold was rewarded and thanksgiving. He utilizes them and other gifts to appease the rulers of smaller kingdoms to join to fight against Kunimasanta. The uncle of Kunimasta revives the 3 bases. He gets restored almost all shrines and builds 84 new, helping the new dharma to survive. In this next round, the teacher who taught Paramita for 20 years is assassinated by the burglars from Duruka. His blood turns into milk and many flowers emerge from his body and he goes into the sky. It is surprising that, while this Marxists like D.N. Jha would call our itihasas as the myth and for the miraculous instances being mentioned there and so on and on, here he's using a text which is talking about an incidence of around, say, 900 AD or something. And the text has been written in 18th century. There, it's talk about the miracles like blood turning into milk and flowers, which is emerging from the body of the monk. So this becomes like their primary source to build a case. So it's actually very, in my opinion, it's quite tragic, hilarious, and quite cynical. So this translation was very well provided by Arun Shourie in his book Eminent Historians, Their Technology, Their Line, Their Fraud, right? So as the title itself suggests, it speaks it all. So here he had presented the translation done by Ghesi Dorji Damdul, and which I have put across here in the snippet as well. So the third aspect which D.N. Jha has picked up in his work has been described with respect to burning of library, and which this has been exclusively summarized by S.C. Das. S.C. Das was a source for D.N. Jha, and he had just summarized it, but it has been well translated by Ghese Dorji Damdul, which I have put in here. So the story was this, what I read from the earlier slide. And see how the summary was put across by S.C. Das, which was picked by D.N. Jha to build a case that Hindu fanatics really burned the place. So you don't even see the sources matching, or perhaps the primary source not exactly being what the secondary sources are being talked about. So now the question arises that will any Marxist of the day will believe an account like fire rain over building using Siddhi, water flowing from scriptures to protect them. So these all were the incidences which has been captured over here, that when the beggar burned the place, so it was burned by he did the Siddhi, and that's how the Nalanda burned. And the water started flowing from the scripture to protect them. So this account is again appearing from the Tibetan text, which is of the 18th century. And we are trying to base this case as a reason that the mighty Nalanda was burnt down by a couple of beggars who did a Siddhi. And at the same time, the scriptures started pouring water to protect the place. And that is the reason why the place didn't burn completely, but it still got destroyed. So these mythical sources are becoming the primary or the main sources for the Marxist historians. So now the claim of Hindu fanatic comes from a secondary sources, as what D.N. Jha had used in his presidential lecture. So in that, if you see that all the sources which I have highlighted, they are actually the secondary sources. They are not the primary for the term fanatic, Hindu fanatics. So the primary source, the quote, does not talk about the Hindu fanatics at all. So the question should have been raised to the person, that is D.N. Jha, in 2004, when I was giving presidential lecture of ICH, that why he chose to go against the primary source. And the question also comes to in the mainstream to all of us, that why we are not putting it across so boldly that, if that lecture of 2004 became a strong base to really say that Nalanda was destroyed by a couple of Hindu beggars, which is too irrational, too illogical, but still it comes through the so-called rationalist places like Caravan and so on. So I am completely unable to digest, and I'm sure that showed you that D.N. Jha makes a claim that two non-Buddhist beggars, as per Tibetan text, which he refers to as Hindu fanatics, really burned the place through their own siddhi. One should definitely ask these Marxists that why they choose the very translated text of 20th century, but choose to ignore the same period, like 19th to 20th century intellectuals like, say, Vincent Smith, B.R. Ambedkar, Eliot Dawson, and Will Durant, etc. So let's see that what they talk about in their assertion in that period, in the similar time frame. So this is a snippet which I have put across from the work of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar on the left-hand side. So he is quoting Vincent Smith, that Nalanda University was destroyed by Musalmans in 1197 AD. So this is source from Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, Writing and Speeches, Volume 3. Now, on the right-hand side, we have got what Will Durant says. Will Durant clearly states in his book, Our Oriental Heritage, that Mohammedans burned Nalanda to ground in 1197 and all its monks were slaughtered. We can never estimate the abundant life of ancient India from what these fanatics spared. So, if D.N. Jha is using a source of the same period, we have multiple other sources. And I would say that Dr. Ambedkar was not someone who would try to gloss over any blunders done by the Hindus, because he was not very pro-Hindu the way we may like him to be like. So even he is very clear that who destroyed Nalanda. And interestingly, what I will show you next is going to be more surprising to many lot. So this is the words of Amartya Sen. So everyone knows that Amartya Sen is a left-leaning scholar, and so he is also very clear that who destroyed Nalanda. He says that Nalanda was destroyed in the 1190s, and the destruction was done by the Mohammedan invaders. He is very clear about it too. And then I'll take you to the next clip. So here Arun Shourie has also quoted Vincent Smith in his book Eminent Historians to state that Mohammedans destroyed Nalanda in 1197. So if D.N. Jha can quote secondary sources, so D.N. Jha quote the secondary sources which have got the primary sources, and those primary sources don't talk exactly what D.N. Jha talks, or even those secondary sources don't talk exactly what D.N. Jha is trying to talk. But here, the secondary sources, what I am mentioning, quotes the primary source, and it is exactly in sync with the primary source. So that way, the source which I am putting across is more of a value than what Marxists have been doing. So I'll go to the next one. So this is a very interesting case, because it's and in fact, Autry also talks about this man, Dharma Swamin. So he was the man who traveled to Nalanda after its destruction or the ransacking. And she says that if Nalanda was destroyed, how did he come here? So that means that Nalanda was still existing. But the point is that the Tibetan monk Thosin came to India in 1234, which is 40 years after the ransack and the plunder of Nalanda. He stayed in Magadh for about 2.5 years, and he spent about half a year in Nalanda itself. He says that people lived and hid in the dread of the marauding Muslim rulers. So it means that this tradition of ransacking and troubling the people at the hands of Mohammedan rulers or the invaders was still continuing. Dharmaswami talks of the Vikramshila destruction also, which was somewhere before 1206 AD. Dharmaswami found Nalanda to be the ghost of what it had been. Of the 8 temples and the 14 large and 84 smaller monasteries, only 2 viharas were in serviceable condition. So this happened to be more of a primary source, or rather the contemporary source, which because this looks very rational as well. It is not talking about any miracles or something. It is stating the facts as it was, and at the same time it goes in sync with other primary source too. So one of the most important primary source which we all must look at is Minhaj al-Siraj Juzani's text, and he is very clear that Bakhtiyar Khilji slayed the Brahmins as in the shaved head people, and he destroyed the place in the Bihar. So, but the people like Audrey Truskey have a problem here that how can we take Juzani's or Siraj's text so seriously because he wrote the text 40 years after the so-called destruction. So the case is here such that actually Siraj had met a person who was a part of the destruction of Nalanda along in the hood of Bakhtiyar Khilji. And he had narrated, they were two brothers, and they had narrated this tale to Siraj. And that's what Siraj painted or wrote in his text. So, practically speaking, so if you look, the Siraj just talks about the destruction of the other places, that is Vikramshila and Odantapuri. So, and there's an instance where some Bihar has been spoken about. Now, if you look at the map, the way the map exists, if someone is coming from Delhi, it is impossible to visit the other places like Vikramshila without actually passing by through Nalanda. So he was certainly passing by through the Nalanda, and we see as a very much of evidence from the fact that the place is celebrated. Like we still have Bakhtiyarpur junction right there, so which is glaring into our eyes, and it was certainly for some reason. It just didn't happen out of blues. So, in fact, Eliot and Dawson has also given the translation, and he differs a bit in the translation, but he still is also very much in line that Bakhtiyar Khilji did destroy the place.